The gates of Kirovsk groaned open like a dying thing, a sound swallowed by the wind that forever scoured the walls. Beyond the reinforced steel lay a monochrome hell, a landscape of white and grey where the snow didn't cleanse, but buried. It hid the bodies. The wind covered the screams. Yegor, a man whose late 30s were etched deeper than the scar running down his brow, shouldered his weathered pack and stepped out. The heavy gate thudded shut behind him, the final note of his old life. He was alone. Outside the walls, you weren't a man. You were bait. His destination was Perm, 120 kilometers east through the irradiated wasteland of what was once Russia. The year was 2040, but calendars were relics for burning. In his pack, precious penicillin vials wrapped in rags, salvaged tech components that hummed with faint, forgotten power, and 2 bottles of barter-grade vodka that could open doors or close wounds. It was a fortune. It was a death sentence. He walked, a solitary figure in the white silence, his breath misting the inside of his gas mask. The world was a graveyard of the old time. Road signs, pitted by gunfire, pointed to towns that no longer existed. The hollow husks of cars lined the abandoned highway like fossilized insects. He passed an overturned tank, its armor scorched and buckled, half fused to the pavement in a moment of cataclysmic heat. It was a monument to a war nobody won. A snap cut the air. It wasn't the sound of ice or a branch. It was the dry, definitive crack of bone. Yegor dropped into a crouch behind a snow-buried sedan, his rifle already in his hands. His eyes, narrowed to slits, scoped the skeletal birch forest flanking the road. For a moment, nothing. Then, a flicker of movement, something low and fast crawling just out of clear view. A pair of glowing, lupine eyes caught the weak light between the trunks, held his gaze for a heartbeat, and vanished. "Not today," Yegor whispered, the words a ghost on his lips. With practiced, economical movement, he unclipped a noisemaker from his belt, a crude contraption of scrap metal and a matchstick timer. He sparked it, hurled it far to his left, and immediately broke into a low, sprinting crouch to the right. The clattering racket erupted behind him, followed instantly by a guttural, piercing howl that tore at the silence. The trap had worked. Just barely. As dusk bled into a starless night, he found refuge in the mouth of a derelict rail tunnel, carved beneath the corpse of a collapsed village. A rusted metro car lay on its side like a beached metal whale, offering a semblance of shelter from the biting wind. He built a small, shielded fire inside its hollow belly, the flames casting dancing, monstrous shadows on the corroded walls. Refuge! Until it wasn't. A new sound joined the wind's moan. A wet, skittering scuttle. And then another, a sound that froze the blood in his veins. A baby's cry, but warped, distorted, run through with the screech of radio feedback. Yegor rose slowly, his rifle becoming an extension of his arms. He panned the flashlight mounted under its barrel. The beam swept across the tunnel wall beyond the car, and his breath hitched. The wall was not stone and mortar. It was a pulsating, organic mass of veined flesh sacs, quivering like diseased hearts. Larval creatures, pale and multi-limbed, chewed methodically on the remains of some unidentifiable animal or what he hoped was an animal. The largest one detached itself from the shadows. It was tall, unnaturally thin, its limbs jointed all wrong. Skin like stretched, greasy parchment pulled taut over a twitching skeleton. Its head rotated, featureless save for a mouth that unfolded sideways in a horrific bloom of needle teeth. It screamed. The sound was pure, physical pain, a shrieking feedback that felt like ice picks in his ears. Gunfire answered. 3 sharp, concussive roars that lit the tunnel in strobic flashes. The creature jerked and fell, spasming. Another dropped from the ceiling above him, its claws scraping against his shoulder, tearing through layers of cloth and skin. He slammed the butt of his rifle into its face, feeling chitin crack, and fired a 4th round point blank. He didn't wait for more. Bleeding, a hot fire in his shoulder, he limped out of the tunnel and back into the cleansing cold of the night. He never looked back. He simply pulled the pin on his last grenade, let the spoon fly, and tossed it behind him into the metro car. The explosion was a brief, satisfying promise of purification. By dawn, he was stumbling, his body running on fumes. He found a hollow village, a ghost town preserved in frost. In a schoolyard littered with the frozen, smiling faces of frost-bitten dolls, he lit another small fire. As he tried to rebandage his shoulder, a figure emerged from a nearby ruin. A hermit, wrapped in layers of mismatched furs, his face hidden deep within a hood. The man said nothing. He simply crouched on the other side of the fire, his eyes gleaming in the flames. After a long silence, the hermit placed a battered, old compass on the frozen ground between them and pointed a grimy finger across the vast, snow-covered lake that bordered the village. A shortcut. Yegor understood. But it was thin ice. Both literally and metaphorically. He nodded his thanks and left one of the bottles of vodka by the fire. The hermit didn't move, didn't speak, only watched as Yegor set out across the frozen plain. The ice groaned and creaked beneath his boots, a constant, low-level threat. More than once, a spiderweb of cracks shot out from his feet, and he had to spread his weight and hold his breath. He learned not to look down into the black water beneath the milky ice. The reflections were liars, showing shapes that moved just out of sight. When the angular, harsh lines of Perm's outer walls finally broke the horizon, it was evening. The snowfall was thickening, turning the world into a swirling, grey mess. The floodlights atop the walls clicked on, one by one, cutting through the gloom like accusing fingers. A voice, distorted by a megaphone, boomed across the no-man's land. "Halt! Identify yourself!" Yegor, his energy spent, simply threw back his hood. He stood there, exposed, and slowly held up the small, insulated case containing the penicillin. Silence. A long, tense moment where the only sound was the wind whipping against his coat. Then, with a reluctant, metallic shriek, the heavy gate began to creep open. He didn't wait for a full welcome. He pushed through the gap and trudged into the crowded, muddy streets of the city-state. He found the infirmary, a converted warehouse smelling of antiseptic and decay. Without a word, he set the case of vials down on a nearby table where a haggard medic stood. The man's eyes widened, his jaw going slack. Yegor didn't stay for thanks. He collapsed in a shadowed corner, his back against the wall, and began the slow, painful process of peeling off his frozen boots. There were no medals, no applause. Just the quiet, rhythmic sound of his own breathing, and from across the room, the sound of a child coughing, a little less desperately than they had the day before. He closed his eyes. "We don't do this for hope," he thought, the old mantra surfacing through the exhaustion. Hope died with the world. We do it because something worse is waiting if we don't. Outside, relentless and eternal, the black snow continued to fall.